Right now, somewhere in the world, a person over 60 is dying, not from a disease diagnosed in a hospital, not from an accident, not from fate, but from a habit they repeated every single morning for decades without ever questioning it. And the most terrifying part? They never knew. Their doctor never told them. And if no one tells you today, you might be next. Every single morning, something remarkable happens inside your body, something that most of us walk past, ignore, rush through, or simply never notice. The sun has not yet fully risen. The world is still half asleep. And yet within the first 60 minutes of your waking life, your biology is already making a series of quiet, irreversible decisions about your energy, your metabolism, your brain chemistry, and even the length of your years. This is not a metaphor. This is molecular truth. And if you are over 60, those first 60 minutes matter in a way that is unlike any other time in your life, because the body you inhabit today is not the body you had at 30. It has changed in ways that are both profound and deeply misunderstood. Most people over 60 are still waking up the same way they did decades ago, following the same morning habits, the same routines, the same assumptions. And that, quietly and invisibly, is costing them their health. The biological cost of jumping out of bed. Let us begin with the very first moment, the moment your eyes open. It is a moment so ordinary, so endlessly repeated across a lifetime, that most people have never once paused to think about what is actually happening inside the body during it. You wake. You feel the pull of the day. And almost instinctively, automatically, you swing your legs over the side of the bed and stand. The motion is so habitual it feels like nothing, a neutral act, a mere transition from sleeping to living. But biologically, it is anything but neutral. Consider what your body has been doing through the night. For 6, 7, 8 hours, you have been horizontal. Your heart has been beating more slowly. Your blood pressure has been maintained at its lowest levels of the entire 24-hour cycle. Your blood vessels, particularly the arteries and veins in your legs and lower body, have been operating in a state of relative relaxation, without the constant demand to push blood upward against gravity. Your autonomic nervous system, which governs all of this without any conscious instruction from you, has been in its most restful configuration. Now, in the hours just before dawn, and in the early morning moments of waking, something extraordinary begins. A process called orthostatic preparation, a slow, intricate biological recalibration, quietly begins to unfold. Your adrenal glands begin releasing small, graduated pulses of hormones. Your sympathetic nervous system begins gently elevating vascular tone. Your heart rate begins to rise incrementally. The entire cardiovascular system is, in essence, warming up, preparing for the fundamental mechanical challenge of standing upright and moving through a world that demands the heart pump blood vertically, against the full force of gravity, to a brain that sits nearly 1.5 meters above the ground. In a younger body, this preparation happens quickly. The arterial walls are elastic and responsive. The baroreceptors, those exquisitely sensitive pressure-detecting cells embedded in the walls of the carotid arteries and the aortic arch, fire with precision, instantly detecting any drop in pressure and signaling the heart to compensate. The entire system is fast, adaptive, resilient. But the body over 60 is a different physiological landscape. The arterial walls, over decades of pressure and flow, have gradually stiffened, not necessarily to a diseased degree, but measurably inevitably. The baroreceptors respond a fraction more slowly. The adrenal hormones that orchestrate the cardiovascular response are released with a slightly more measured hand. The system still works, beautifully, in fact, but it works on a slightly longer timeline, and it needs the time it asks for. When a person over 60 stands up too quickly, the cardiovascular system has not yet completed its recalibration. Blood, obeying gravity, pools momentarily in the vessels of the legs and abdomen. Pressure in the arteries supplying the brain drops suddenly. The brain, which is the single most metabolically demanding organ in the body, consuming roughly 20% of the body's entire oxygen supply despite being only 2% of its mass, experiences a brief, measurable reduction in blood flow. This is orthostatic hypotension, and in many people it announces itself as a momentary dizziness, a slight graying at the edges of vision, a fleeting sense of unreality. In others, and this is where the true danger lives, It is entirely silent, felt as nothing at all, and yet the blood pressure drop is real and the cardiovascular strain is genuine. Falls, which carry devastating consequences in people over 60, fractures, hospitalizations, a measurable acceleration of physical decline, do not always happen because of obstacles or accidents. A significant proportion originate in this single, unguarded morning moment, in the invisible intersection of gravity, an aging cardiovascular system, and a body that simply was not given the 30 seconds it needed to prepare. And beyond the acute risk of falling, there's a longer, slower cost that accumulates invisibly. Repeated morning blood pressure instability drives cortisol elevations, and those cortisol elevations, sustained day after day over months and years, feed the inflammatory pathways that quietly burden the aging heart and the aging brain in ways that no single morning ever reveals, but that the whole body, over time, quietly records. Now consider the second mistake, one that is so woven into the fabric of modern mornings that it has almost become invisible. The coffee. The beautiful, aromatic, beloved cup of coffee that most people reach for within the first 10 minutes of waking, often before they have had a single sip of water. Here is what is scientifically remarkable about that choice. After 6, 7, 8 hours of sleep, your body is in a state of mild physiological dehydration. You have been breathing, and with every breath, water vapor has been leaving your body. You have not consumed a single drop of fluid. Your blood viscosity is slightly elevated. Your kidneys, which spend the night filtering and concentrating urine, are waiting. Your digestive system is running on empty reserves. Every cell in your body is quietly thirsty. And in that moment of mild, whole-body thirst, you introduce caffeine, a molecule whose first biological action is to inhibit adenosine receptors in the brain. Yes, but whose second action, which receives far less attention, is to act as a mild diuretic. It signals the kidneys to increase urine output. In a body that is already dehydrated from a night of sleep, caffeine before water pushes dehydration deeper before the day has even properly begun. For people over 60, this matters more than many appreciate. Kidney function naturally declines with age, not dramatically in healthy individuals, but measurably. The thirst mechanism, that elegant evolutionary signal that has kept humans alive for millennia, becomes less sensitive with age. Many older adults simply do not feel thirsty even when they genuinely need water. They rely on habit and schedule to hydrate, not on biological cues. And when the morning habit is coffee first, water is delayed, sometimes for hours. Chronic mild dehydration in older adults has been linked to cognitive fog, urinary tract infections, constipation, kidney stone formation, and even a measurable reduction in joint lubrication. The synovial fluid that cushions your knees and hips. That fluid depends on adequate hydration to maintain its volume and viscosity. The morning you skip your water for coffee is the morning your joints quietly pay a price. The correction is simple and almost painfully obvious once you understand the biology. Drink water first, before the coffee. Even just one full glass of water before caffeine changes the entire metabolic trajectory of the morning. It rehydrates the cells, supports kidney filtration, wakes the digestive system gently, and allows coffee, when it follows, to be the pleasure it was always meant to be, not a biochemical deficit. Skipping morning light, the hidden disruption to your circadian clock. The third mistake is one of the quietest, and perhaps the most consequential over the long arc of years. Most people over 60 wake up, go directly to the kitchen, turn on artificial lights or open a phone screen, and begin their indoor morning without ever stepping outside or even exposing their eyes to the natural light of the early day. And in doing so, they are interrupting something that is fundamental to human biology, the circadian reset. Your circadian rhythm is not merely a sleep schedule. It is a biological clock embedded into virtually every cell of your body. Your liver cells, your immune cells, your neurons, your cardiovascular cells, all running on a roughly 24-hour cycle that governs when hormones are released, when inflammation peaks and recedes, when metabolism is most active, when DNA repair happens most efficiently. And this internal clock is calibrated, reset, every single day by one primary signal: natural light entering the eyes in the morning, specialized photoreceptor cells in your retina, called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, detect the specific wavelengths of natural morning light and send signals directly to a tiny region of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master pacemaker of your entire circadian system. When morning light hits these cells, the suprachiasmatic nucleus sends a cascade of instructions. Suppress residual melatonin, begin cortisol rise, prepare the metabolic systems, begin timing the day. Without that morning light signal, the circadian clock drifts. It becomes less precise, less synchronized. Melatonin suppression is incomplete. Cortisol timing becomes irregular. Sleep quality the following night is degraded. Over days and weeks, this drift compounds. Over months and years in people over 60, whose circadian systems are already naturally becoming less robust. It contributes to sleep fragmentation, mood dysregulation, impaired immune timing, and has been associated in research with increased risk of metabolic syndrome and cognitive decline. The simple, extraordinary act of stepping outside for even 10 minutes within the first hour of waking, not exercising, not gardening, simply standing in natural light, recalibrates this system powerfully. Even on a cloudy day, outdoor light is dramatically more intense than indoor artificial lighting. It is one of the most underappreciated biological levers available to us, and it costs nothing. Eating nothing, or eating the wrong thing, in the morning hours. The fourth mistake lives in the kitchen, and it comes in two opposite forms that are equally problematic, though for somewhat different reasons. The first is skipping breakfast entirely. The second is beginning the day with a high-sugar, ultra-processed meal that triggers a rapid spike in blood glucose, followed by an equally rapid crash. Let us begin with skipping breakfast. After a full night of sleep, which for most people means 8 or more hours without food, your blood glucose has naturally declined to its lowest point of the day. Your insulin levels are low. Your liver has been quietly releasing stored glucose overnight to keep your brain and heart supplied. By morning, those liver glycogen reserves are substantially depleted. Your body is in a state that researchers describe as a mild fasted state, and in younger, metabolically flexible individuals, the body handles this transition smoothly. In people over 60, this metabolic flexibility is often reduced. When breakfast is skipped, the body continues operating on stress hormones, particularly cortisol and adrenaline, to mobilize energy. In older adults, this means prolonged cortisol elevation through the morning hours, which carries genuine costs, increased blood pressure, heightened inflammatory signaling, and in those with any insulin resistance, a condition that becomes more common with age, a magnified glucose response when food finally arrives later in the day. The pancreas, which produces insulin, also becomes less responsive with age. Asking it to manage large glucose fluctuations repeatedly is a burden that accumulates. On the other side, a breakfast of processed cereals, white toast with jam, sweetened yogurt, or pastries delivers a concentrated sugar load into a system that, precisely because it has been fasted all night, is highly sensitive to glucose. Blood sugar rises rapidly. Insulin spikes in response. And roughly 90 minutes later, blood sugar falls, sometimes below the fasting level, leaving the person feeling foggy, irritable, fatigued, and craving more sugar. This is the blood glucose roller coaster, and it is a physiological stressor that, when it occurs daily for years, accelerates inflammatory aging and metabolic dysfunction. What the body over 60 benefits from most in the morning is a meal that combines protein, fiber, and healthy fat in moderate quantities, something that provides stable, sustained energy, supports muscle protein synthesis, particularly important because muscle mass declines with age, and keeps blood sugar even throughout the morning. This is not a complex dietary prescription. It is simply understanding what a body in its 6th, 7th, or 8th decade of life genuinely needs, and honoring that need with intention. Beginning the day in mental stillness, the neuroscience of morning stress. And finally, the fifth mistake, perhaps the most human of all, and therefore the most universal. The mistake of beginning every morning in a state of reactive stress. Reaching for the phone before even the eyes have fully adjusted to the light. Reading headlines. Checking messages. Scrolling through the dense, relentless stream of other people's crises, opinions, demands, and fears. And in doing so, activating the stress response before the body has had any opportunity to emerge peacefully from its overnight state of repair. Your brain during the first 30 minutes of waking is in a remarkable neurological state. As sleep transitions to wakefulness, the brain passes briefly through a period called hypnopompic, a state in which theta waves, associated with creativity, intuition, and reflective processing, remain active. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function, rational thought, and emotional regulation, is still warming up, still coming fully online. This is a window of profound neurological opportunity. It is a window that, in many traditions across human history, was protected through silence, through prayer, through gentle movement, through reflection. When you introduce the phone in this window, particularly social media, news, or emotionally charged content, you are flooding a transitional neurological state with cortisol-triggering information before your prefrontal cortex has the capacity to fully regulate your emotional response. The amygdala, which processes threat and emotional reactivity, comes online faster from sleep than the prefrontal cortex does. And so the first information your waking brain encounters is processed primarily through the lens of threat, reactivity, and emotion, before the rational, regulating mind is ready to contextualize it. For people over 60, this matters in a specific and scientifically grounded way. The brain in later life naturally shows some reduction in the speed of prefrontal regulation. This is a normal aspect of aging, not a disease. Emotional reactivity, when it is chronically elevated, drives cortisol. Chronic cortisol elevation in older adults has been directly associated with hippocampal volume reduction, the hippocampus being the brain region most central to memory formation and emotional context. The research literature on this is clear and compelling. Chronic stress is not merely uncomfortable. It is neurologically costly, and in the aging brain, those costs are amplified. The invitation here is not to build an unrealistic morning ritual or to pretend that life holds no urgency. It is simply to protect the first 10 or 15 minutes of consciousness as if they were precious, because biologically they are. Gentle movement, slow breathing, a moment of stillness before the world rushes in, or simply sitting with a glass of water and looking out at the light. These are not luxuries. They are, from a neuroscientific perspective, acts of genuine self-preservation. There is something quietly profound about the idea that health, at its deepest level, is not built in hospitals or laboratories. It is built in kitchens and bedrooms and doorways, in the 10,000 small decisions of daily life that most of us never examine because they feel too ordinary to matter. The morning is where the body sets its tone for the entire day, its hormonal rhythm, its metabolic trajectory, its neurological baseline. And the body over 60 is a body that has earned the right to be understood more carefully, treated with greater intelligence, and honored with the specific kind of attention that only knowledge can provide. Science does not tell us that aging is a problem to be solved. It tells us that aging is a process to be understood, and that within that understanding lies a remarkable amount of room to live with greater vitality, clarity, and ease. The morning is not just the beginning of a day. It is, in the deepest biological sense, the beginning of everything that follows. And now you know how to begin it differently. If this conversation moved something in you, if it made you pause, reflect, or think differently about the body you live in, then this work has done what it was meant to do. There's more, much more, waiting for you. Subscribe to this channel so that knowledge like this finds you before the years take what silence could have protected. Subscribe. Like, share with someone you love, because good health shared is health multiplied.